If somehow you haven't seen the first episode of this series, stop here, go back, watch it. It's important and it explains why this project is so special to me. Now that you've seen it, let's dive in. We've got some hideous US bumpers we've got to tear off of this E30 so that we can make it look at least a little bit better. In the last episode, we took a look at the US E30 bumpers and compared them to Euro bumpers. It was a showcase of exactly how awful US E30s were cursed from the factory. The rest of the world got chrome slimline bumpers that accentuate the lines of the E30 in contrast to the quote-unquote diving boards we were given. Oddly enough, there are people out there that prefer these US diving board bumpers, but I'm not one of them, and with the E30 finally in the shop, we can give the front end an overhaul. Along with the bumpers, we're going to install a Euro valence, a new front lip, ellipsoid headlights, Euro grills, and new kidneys, ensuring that the entire front end of this thing not only looks better, but looks the way that it was supposed to all the way back in the 80s. Now, most of these parts are admittedly only subtly different. The bumpers are the big one, and the rest take a bit of a BMW fanatic to notice, but I'll do my best to break each detail down so that you can appreciate them the same way that I do. We'll start with the headlights, because not only have mine been fitted with ugly red trim rings, but they are also early sealed beam headlights, which you can see here on these early E30 commercials. When they're in like-new condition, they look just fine, but with that said, there is room for improvement here, because once the E30 received its facelift, it also received ellipsoid headlights. If you look closely, you'll notice that these E30 headlights have a projector housing in them, one of the very first cars to feature such a headlight, which is still in use on cars today. They offer a much better light output than their earlier sealed beam counterparts, and not to mention, they look really good. So while some BMW nerds might be a bit upset I'm going anachronistic by installing these on an early model E30, well, it's my car, I like them, so that's what we're going to do. But before we install the headlights, there's more disassembly to be done. Up next is removing the US impact bumper and all of the trim that surrounds it. Now let's talk about why US E30s and other early BMWs have these gigantic bumpers to begin with. It's because federal crash safety regulations stated that cars must have what they call 5-mile-per-hour impact bumpers, essentially bumpers that would prevent any damage from happening at 5 miles per hour or less. And unfortunately for us, this was BMW's solution. But thankfully, as said, we can replace these bumpers with the original European counterparts. And that brings us to the final step of the teardown, removing the US valence. Now, as said, most of these differences are somewhat subtle, but here I've got the original US part and our European counterpart sitting side by side. The major difference is that the US valence has huge holes at each corner. Technically it works and it's not a requirement to swap this out to go to European bumpers, but it makes the entire conversion look a whole lot better. But a real version of this European valence can fetch over $1,000. So keeping in line with what my buddy Corey would do, I bought a cheap knockoff off of eBay, and it fits just fine. I had my neighbor paint it based off of my gas cap, and as expected, it doesn't match the front of the car at all. But again, as Corey would say, dude, it's fine. Even the nicer of his two E30s had mismatched paint of its own, and while I'd never be happy with a paint mismatch like this on any of my other projects, it almost seems so fitting here that I actually kind of like it. This project's really going to serve as an opportunity to shift the way that I think about cars and perfection as a whole. This time around, I'm really here for what this car is meant to drive like and not the process of getting there. But I digress. Back to putting this car together. With the headlights installed, we're able to then install the Euro grills, which admittedly are probably the most subtle change we're going to make. The way that the plastic closes in over the top of the headlight differentiates the US from the European grills, and although it's subtle, it's definitely a change that stands out once you begin to look for it. With the bumper brackets installed, we're able to then put together the bumpers themselves and install the rubber trim. And this probably would have been pretty interesting to see for some of you, but I completely forgot to record it. So this is that moment where I say, draw the rest of the owl, and some of you know what I'm talking about, while the rest of you don't. In short, with the bumper assembled, it is a bolt-on process. The car has all of the provisions so that we can simply line this thing up, tighten the hardware down, and call it done. But there's still the rear of the car that we have to focus on. It's easier in some ways, but does present some new challenges, the main one being that it does require drilling holes in the back of the car in order to mount the bumper brackets. European cars came with holes that our US cars did not. But with the rear components removed, I discovered somebody's crime: black paint on the bottom of the quarter panels, likely put there to cover up stained rock guard coating. Initially, I feared I might have to repaint this section of the car, but I decided I'd try my luck, get out some acetone, and see if I could remove the spray paint by hand. Not only is this a much cheaper solution, it's also 100% what Corey would have tried first. The result is imperfect. Some of the black paint remains, some of the white paint has been rubbed away, but overall, I think this is a great solution for the time being, and it didn't cost a thing. Following the cleanup session, and after drilling some holes, the rear bumper was able to be installed as well. Now, I know we'd all love to take a step back and look at this thing, but there are a few other parts I want to install before we have our grand reveal. First on the list is actually wiring in our new headlights. Now, to be clear, Corey wouldn't have whipped out a Deutsch connector kit. Instead, he probably would have just twisted the wires together and said, "Dude, it's fine." But given that I want to install some HIDs later down the line, I want something that's serviceable and interchangeable. So we're going to use these nice weatherproof Deutsch connectors as a good foolproof solution. Now, I've explained them before, but if you aren't familiar with what a Deutsch connector is or how it works, step 1 involves crimping pins onto individual wires. There are a lot of different tools to do this job, and I use a knockoff DMC. Once crimped, the wires go through the weatherproof backing and into the plug itself, one female and one male. A plastic key locks everything into place, and with that, you're done. We've got a jumper harness for our headlights. Inside the car, I want to swap out our steering wheel. To be honest, the factory 3-spoke is fine. I don't hate it, but I do think that there's room for improvement. I've got a cool Momo Cavallino that I've had on ice ever since it was in my E28, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to pick it up off the shelf and install it in a car once again. So I snagged a Momo hub, installed it in the car, and, well, you know the rest. Here's where I say, if you're enjoying this episode or you want to support the channel, you should consider subscribing if you haven't already. Or leave a like. Both of these help tell the YouTube algorithm that you like what you're seeing. We're almost done, but we have one other round of parts to install. It's not our H&R coilovers, but instead it's a set of H&R race springs that we'll install in the interim while we wait. With my lift currently occupied, I went next door to see the guys at Leichtbau when Byron made a bet. He said he could pull both front McPherson struts, install the front springs, get them reinstalled, and then drop both rear springs and replace those all in under 30 minutes. And since I'm not one to interfere with a bet that saves me a couple hours worth of work, I said, sure bud, go for it. So he swapped out our H&R Sport springs for the H&R Races, which will provide admittedly only a small drop from where we were. But it'll also up the spring rate and give us an even sportier ride than we had already. And for anybody counting at home, Byron got all 4 springs installed in 26 minutes flat. But I guess I shouldn't expect anything less from Leichtbau. Now, let's finally take a look at this thing. I don't know how you guys feel, but this is a massive, massive improvement on the way this car looks as a whole. Of course, wheels or flashy paint would make an even bigger difference, as would some sort of body kit, but honestly, I love the way this looks, and this is quintessentially an E30. While I'm excited about our new headlights, the new grills, the bumpers, the valance, and our new steering wheel, there's something else that I find myself more excited about. This time around, I'm excited to have this car finished. That might sound weird to say because, of course, that's the case with every project, but unlike the Ferrari, this car isn't so much about the process as it is about the end result. With previous projects, people often ask why I built it, whether it's the Ferrari, Rusty, or something else. I think they often expect an answer along the lines of, I built it for racing, or I built it for drifting, not really expecting the answer to be, I built it just to build it. This time around, though, I'm eager to actually drive the car. I mean, I always am, but that's what this car is about. I want to embrace all the things my friend Corey loved about this thing, and I want to share the experiences that made it so special to him. This time, the process isn't about the fabrication or the problem solving, it's solely about embracing new ideas and new approaches to building a car, like preventing perfection from becoming the enemy of good enough. The car is basic in this state, but it's one step closer to being complete, and to say I'm excited about it is an absolute understatement. Now at this point, you guys know the major changes that are still left in the pipeline, like the engine and the transmission swap, but there are a few small details that got left unfinished for this episode. I need to come up with a solution for the lower bumper trim mounts at the back of the car, and lurking behind the bumper are the bumper shock holes, which I want to make some sort of plug for. The right solution would just be to weld in a Eurovalence, but nah, I'm not doing that. And last but not least, I've got to come up with a solution for these protruding exhaust tips. On that note, that's all I've got for this episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed the progress so far. As for what's next, I really want to get the engine and the transmission in this thing swapped. They're relatively minor in the scheme of things, and they shouldn't take that long to do. But I'm kind of waiting to go out and carve canyons until those are done, because one, going out and driving mountain roads with an automatic ETA isn't very enticing, and two, I want that experience to be everything that it can be. So once those are out of the way, this car will be kind of on the home stretch. We'll get the coilover installed, the wheels and tires, and cross a few more things off the list, and then it's just go out and drive the hell out of this thing. And I'm excited for it. As said, this project is about getting to that end result versus the process to get there. If you guys are enjoying the series, make sure you subscribe. If you want to support the channel and you're looking for a good way to do it, of course there is the Patreon or the Discord. We got memberships for both. Or for the next episode, which will come out sometime next week, I've got new apparel coming out. I try to make sure that you guys are provided the highest quality stuff I'm able to put together, so there's something in exchange. You guys get some out of it too. With all that said, I'm done. I'm rambling. I didn't plan this exit out, this outro, whatever you want to call it. I'm really rambling. I'll catch you guys next week.